Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Caitlin and on this channel I upload all sorts of content relating to true crime, education and psychology related topics. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy and you haven't already, then please do hit that subscribe button and don't forget to turn on your little notification bell so you know whenever I upload a new video. So for today's case, we're back discussing a case called the Las Cruces Bowling Alley Massacre, which remains unsolved to this day, 30 odd years later, which is absolutely baffling. And as always, I would love to know your guys' thoughts down below. But before we get started, I am just going to whiz through my normal disclaimer that I like to include at the start of all my videos. Just letting you guys know that I'm not claiming to be an expert in this case or any of the other cases that I cover over on my channel. I'm simply relaying the information I'm able to find myself through research of certain sources on the internet, and because only certain sources are accessible to me, it means I may get things wrong, leave things out or mispronounce things. I apologise if I do any of those things. I'm not trying to cause anyone any harm or an injustice. I'm simply working with the information that I have available to me. So with all that being said, let's just go ahead and get started discussing the case of the Las Cruces Bowling Alley Massacre. So this case took place in the Las Cruces Bowling Alley at 1201 East Amador Avenue in Las Cruces, New Mexico on February the 10th, 1990. At 8 AM on the morning of February the 10th, 34-year-old Stephanie C. Senack, the manager of the bowling alley, was sat in her office getting everything ready to open up for the day. Her 12-year-old daughter, Melissa Repass, was also there with her mother's boyfriend's daughter, 13-year-old Amy Hauser. The two young girls were getting themselves ready to help run the daycare inside the bowling alley for the young children of the customers. Stephanie's brother Steve had arrived around this same time to pick up his backpack that he'd left with his sister, but before he left he told his sister to lock all of the doors before having to open them officially for the day. He hadn't told her why he said this, but she hadn't really thought much of it. Also in the bowling alley was Ida Holguin, who was the cook in the bowling alley, and Ida was in the kitchen preparing for her day of work before the group of youth bowlers were due in at 9 AM. Amy and Melissa had been the ones who ran into the two unknown men at the vending machines inside the alley. The two men had entered through one of the unlocked doors of the building, and the girls had initially just seen the men and asked them if they need help. Rather than responding to the girls, one of the men had pulled out a .22 caliber pistol and ordered the girls into the office where Stephanie was sitting looking over the previous night's receipts. From here, one of the gunmen headed to the kitchen where he held Ida at gunpoint and ordered her to join the others in the office. The two gunmen had then continued to raid the safe inside the bowling alley's office. In total, they'd taken somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 from this safe in cash. And not long after the men had done so, 26-year-old Steve Turan had entered into the bowling alley. Turan worked as a pin mechanic, and he'd spent the morning struggling to get a babysitter for his 2-year-old daughter Valerie and his 6-year-old stepdaughter Paula. As he'd been unsuccessful in finding a babysitter for the day, he decided he would just bring his daughters into the bowling alley and leave them in the care of the daycare that the bowling alley ran. When they'd entered the building, he'd expected to see some of the staff moving about, setting up the building ready for the day, but he'd seen no one, and so he headed straight to Stephanie Senack's office. Here he came face to face with the horrific scene with the women and girls being held at gunpoint by two men. The men pointed their guns at Steve and his daughters and ordered them to stay in the office with the other hostages while they continued to sift through the other cupboards. After they were finished searching through everything, they turned to the hostages and ordered them all to kneel on the ground with their heads on the floor. The two gunmen then proceeded to shoot Steve Turan and his daughters, as well as Stephanie Senack, her daughter and her boyfriend's daughter, and Ida Holguin. Before fleeing the scene, the gunman proceeded to set fire to the manager's office using the papers that were on the desk. At 8:33 AM, first responders received the report of the fire in the bowling alley and police officers were sent out to aid the firemen at the scene. Here they discovered that Stephen Turan, his 6-year-old stepdaughter Paula and Amy Hauser had all died at the scene. 2-year-old Valerie Turan was rushed to the hospital in an attempt to save her life, but she was pronounced dead on arrival 45 minutes later. Melissa Repass, Stephanie Senack's daughter, had been shot a total of 5 times, but despite her injuries, she had actually been the one who'd managed to reach a phone located in the office to call 911, and this quick report of the incident allowed her to not only have her own life saved, but also her mother and Ida's life. Ida remained in hospital for 6 months after the incident to recover, Melissa for 11 days, and sadly Stephanie Senac died 9 years after the shooting as a result of long-term complications with her injuries. Within an hour passing of the incident occurring, a total of 10 roadblocks were set up surrounding the area of Las Cruces. At these roadblocks, anyone attempting to leave the city was stopped and questioned and searched in an attempt for them to locate the 2 shooters. Before long, the search for the shooters was aided by the US Customs Service, the Army and the Border Patrol, all deploying planes and helicopters in the search for anyone that could be viewed as potentially suspicious in the area. Police had set out in search of any potential witnesses to the crime that could aid their search for the perpetrators, even just provide a description of them. Stephanie Senac's brother Steve had told the investigators that he had been driving past the bowling alley just a few minutes before the shooting had occurred, whilst heading out of the alley after picking up his backpack from his sister. He claimed to have seen 2 Hispanic men headed in the direction of the entrance of the building coming from the back of the building, so they were walking from the back towards the front. He said that one of these men had seemed noticeably older than the other, and this older one had apparently handed his younger acquaintance a briefcase. Steve then claimed he saw the older man squat down before he then spotted Steve driving past the building, and he'd stared directly at him until Steve had driven completely away. And in terms of the motive, it's not known whether or not the perpetrators had set out with the intention of murdering, or whether it was just a robbery that had gone wrong. There were rumours circulating that the men had entered the building with the intention of stealing money from the safe, but had then been completely shocked when they'd found people already inside. According to the statement that Ida had given the authorities, she was adamant that these men were familiar to her in some way, and that someone must have known who they are or must have some knowledge of the incident. And she'd put this feeling of familiarity down to likely recognising the perpetrators as being customers during her day-to-day workings at the bowling alley. And these 2 gunmen still remain unidentified to this day. Perpetrators were described as being Hispanic by the witness and the surviving victims, but they made a point of noting that they spoke perfect English. As a result of the descriptions provided by the surviving victims, the first gunman was approximately 5 foot 10 inches tall, weighing somewhere between 160 and 170 pounds. He had brown hair and brown eyes with a moustache and no discernible accent. They placed him at being around 28 to 34 years old at the time, meaning he would be in his late 40s to early 50s today. And the second gunman was said to have been around 5 foot 6 inches tall, weighing around 140 pounds. And this man had greyish white hair and brown eyes, and he had spoke with a very slight Spanish accent. They placed him at being around 48 to 54 years old at the time, meaning he would be in his late 60s to early 70s today. And sketches of these suspects based on these descriptions were created, which I'll put on screen now, along with the age progression sketches that were created more recently. It has since been theorised that these crimes were related to drugs in some way. There was one woman in particular who had come forward to investigators and told them that the 2 suspects had stayed with her for a short while after the murders. According to her, she knew that the victims were killed as a result of an incident involving drugs. But it was known that this woman was a regular drug user herself, and when she'd become sober, she actually recanted her statement entirely. But this suggestion that it may have been a drug-related crime did give investigators an entirely new avenue to explore. Stephanie and Stephen's brother RJ was also an employee at the bowling alley working as a bartender, and he was sort of looked at to do with this area of the investigation. His friends and family had told the authorities that he was a regular drug user, more specifically a cocaine abuser. There were also multiple witnesses who had claimed that they were aware that RJ conducted a large majority of his drug deals inside the bowling alley. However, RJ was questioned thoroughly by the police, and they could find no information that would suggest he had any knowledge of the incident or the perpetrators, nor that he had anything that could potentially even be linked in any way. Ron Senac, the owner of the bowling alley, was also investigated at one point. It was known that he was having some pretty difficult money problems, and because of this, he was temporarily living inside the bowling alley. But at the time of the murders, the shootings, he was out of town, and this was confirmed. But just 6 days after the killings, he chose to reopen the bowling alley, something which struck a lot of people as being unusual and suspicious and just insensitive. And then in December of that same year, it was discovered that he had actually sold the bowling alley, as it had allegedly amassed around $1.5 million in debt. Police did focus their efforts on looking into Cenac as a potential suspect, but found nothing conclusive that could suggest that he had any form of involvement or knowledge. Over 30 years later, the two men responsible for the shootings inside the Las Cruces bowling alley remain unidentified, and a lot of the people involved in this case, the investigators, are adamant that someone out there knows something even all these years later. So as always, please do leave your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and I will see you guys very soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.